Andy, we've got a problem.
What? They go.
Reality's here. He's trying to crash the party. Reality? Who let him in?
You're sad that people are mean? Well, I'm sorry. The world isn't one big liberal arts college campus.
I don't have an agenda like I want people to do something. I need them to do something. I want them to avoid irrationality.
I guess what interests me is just like what interests everybody else. It's just sort of what feels real.
That was totally wicked!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Real News on a Friday morning. My name, Mr. Henry. David Shine Thompson sitting beside me there. Real News Radio. No, it's just realnews.live. I'm pretty sure. Yes. No, Real News Radio. realnewsradio.live. Central hub where you're going to be able to find all the real news related stuff. You can find the video that's going live right now. You can find links to our YouTube, to our Facebook page. You can find a little bit of the show notes every now and then. You can find cool little merch like this mug right here that has this this nifty little top that if I continue to put on there, makes it too hot to drink sometimes. It's one of those double insulated type things. You know what I mean?
It's look how functional it is. You can fold it and put it under your bed.
That's exactly right.
Won't take up any space.
That's realnewsradio.live. Help support the cause, man. Like I said before, my name is Mr. Henry. David Sean Thompson sitting over there beside me. We got Cody in there, got Sherry in there, we got Judy in there. We got all the friends and fam in there. Today, by the way, you'll see at the show notes at the top of the description section here. This is a massive, massive show today. You'll actually see in the show notes that it just looks like it's just a bunch of links, and that's essentially what it is. It's just a bunch of links this morning because there were so many stories going on. There was so much stuff to cover. There were so many things to hit. And even within a single story, obviously what I'm making direct reference here to, even within a single story, the George Floyd, Minneapolis protest aftermath, there are so many different angles that are unfolding to a story like that. It's 20 different headlines in that alone. Each one of the headlines delivering a different set of analysis and a different angle to look at. And there's all kind of like weird nonsense coming out now about where these protests, were some of the riots themselves, were they orchestrated in a sense? Yeah, I'm just going to tease that for right now. I know y'all hate when I do it, but it's going to happen.
I have a conspiracy theory.
Go, buddy, go.
About why you didn't give us curated links. It's because you're worried about this executive order. You just want to posted the links. You didn't want to be
I didn't want to be shut down, man.
A publisher. You just wanted, that's what it was.
That's right, man. Yeah, I don't want to be labeled as a publisher. I'm just trying to maintain my platform status here, dude. No bias. I'm not even going Matt Drudge style here. I'm not even altering what the headline should or should not look like to the individual clicking on them. I'm just copy and pasting pure format. By the way, Sean is obviously making reference to that second and third story, or the second story we're going to get into today is the Trump Twitter saga. There's been some major developments on that recently, which will have massive implications for the 2020 election, I predict here. Quickly, though, greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment here for the folks that are watching on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're watching. Shine has this it's a cool little program that'll sort of aggregate all of the comments for us into one nifty little spot. Let us know how you're doing, what you need help with, what you're struggling with, what you need some outreach for. Do you have any praise or prayer concerns? Anything at all that this community can help you with, or anything at all you'd like this community to know about so we can celebrate with you. That's kind of the purpose of that segment. Throw it in the comment section. Send a direct message to either myself or David over there, or to the Real News chat box. Either way you want to go about that. Let me just jump right into this because part of today, I'm pretty sure, right around the 9:30 mark Central Time, 10:30 mark Eastern Time, halfway at the bottom of the hour wherever you're listening to us. I think what I'm going to do it again, we're opening up for Open Line Fridays. We're the first program to ever say that no other term has ever used that, no other show has ever used that term before the Open Line Fridays. That number, though, you'll see scrolling across the bottom of the screen at some point in the show, 615-807-0619. That will come directly to my computer here. Yep, good to go. I want to know y'all's opinions on a lot of these stories that we're dropping. So at the bottom of the hour, we're going to open those lines up for everybody. Call in that number. Let us know what you think. Starting with a few of these local stories here, though, there is a lot of stuff that's happening in Tennessee, in part because of the George Floyd stuff, in part because the legislature opened back up again this week. Now, that's a weird way to phrase it. They didn't exactly open back up to everybody. To very select few individuals, they opened back up to. Just to give you all some perspective on how this happens, by the way, some behind-the-scenes knowledge as to what's going on up the hill there in Nashville. A certain few people are allowed in that building. A very select few lobbyists are allowed in there. Obviously, the legislators and their staff are allowed in there. But outside of that, not a lot of people are allowed in. And if you want to go to, say, these committee rooms or go meet with someone, let's say you want to go meet with a legislator, you have to make an appointment well ahead of time, which is usually the case, but you have to make an appointment well ahead of time now. One of the legislative assistants or liaison comes down to that first floor where the elevators are to meet you. You have to be masked up. You have to be gloved up, the whole deal. They then walk you individually up to meet in this room with another legislator, just you and you one-on-one. The whole thing is very well designed. It's very well protected. In the committee rooms, they have these plexiglass sort of protectors in front of everybody. They have, black sheets, roped is that a word, but roped off in certain areas, so you can
draped?
only
Was that draped what you were reaching for?
That was draped and roped in the same word together. That's what that was. Draped.
You were an innovator, bro.
That's right, man. New terms all the time. So you have to sit 6 feet apart. Anyways, the point being, committees opened back up this week in the House. The Senate's still saying they're not going to do much at all to move some of this stuff forward, but they're listening to a lot of bills. So for those two reasons, we're hearing a lot of stuff. One in particular, the House subcommittee met and cut the governor's authority over refugee resettlement. Now, this is coming from Ron Gant, Representative Ron Gant. And if you don't know what the story was, all right, so Trump had this new vetting process. He took the same 7 countries that Obama put on a particular list. Now, let's be completely, straight up front here. The 7 countries on this list were primarily comprised of those that identify with the Muslim religion. I think that's the safest way to put it. Everyone knows exactly what I'm going for here. Those were those 7 countries, okay? Now, under the Obama administration, please don't quote me on these numbers because it's been a while since I've looked at them. But there was about 200 to 300,000. I'm saying again, I'll look that up to verify later, but about 200 to 300,000 individuals per year coming from these select few countries. Trump looked at those countries and said, hey, we need to have a massive vetting process. Remember this conversation, right? This was way back, a couple years back now, right? We need to have a new vetting process. Trump is being xenophobic because he's shutting down immigration from these select countries. Remember that conversation? Went to the Supreme Court, yada, yada. Well, he cut that number down from 200 to 300,000 to significantly less. Honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head, or otherwise I'd quote something to you. But suffice to say, I think it's significantly less than what that number was. Out of those that were remaining, they've been vetted. They've been properly understood that they are legitimate refugees, which is a distinctly different category than even an asylum seeker. Right? Refugee status would be like there's like qualified genocide going on. That's a weird way to put it. Qualified. I didn't. Qualified meaning that it's an actual state entity that's attempting to wipe your race off the face of the planet. You have actual subjugation going on. You have, I don't know, drug lords that are wiping out your family. Refugees is a status that's a bit above asylum, is the way the way I've always understood it, since stuff is going on. So Trump vetted these people, brought them into the country. We needed somewhere to send them. So Trump reached out to the governors and said, hey, I'm not going to force y'all to take these individuals on. If you want to, however, though, by all means, let me know and I will send them to your state. Governor Lee was one of those individuals that stepped up and said, yeah, send them over to Tennessee. Now, in Tennessee, I'm pretty sure we were talking about 4,000 individuals. And I may be wrong on those numbers, too. I just want to be clear that I might be wrong. But I remember it being about 4,000 individuals that were coming to Tennessee in 4 distinct counties. Obviously, those being the Memphis area, the Nashville area, a bit in the Knoxville area, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that, too. And maybe somewhere around the Rutherford County. Doesn't matter. The point being is about 4,000, and it wasn't going to be that much in the Nashville area here in particular. That is what the House subcommittee met on yesterday. And that is what they removed the authority over this refugee resettlement situation. Essentially going on to say, hey, hang on. You can't make this decision, Governor Lee, unless you consult the legislature first. You can't do this. And I will say, look, as far as a PR move is concerned, it was a bit of a ball drop for the move on Governor Lee. I don't know what those behind-the-scenes conversations looked like, but there wasn't a lot of public announcement that Governor Lee was going to come out ahead of time and make this decision, because it really implicated the legislature. You're going to use state funds for some of this stuff. The argument that Governor Lee had was, if we're going to bring these, this is his basic pitch, all right? Let's say that Virginia wanted to bring in a bunch of those refugees. Tennessee would have no opportunity to gather information on those individuals. If they're brought into Tennessee, we know the vetting process that took place. We know the family members that may or may not try and seek refugee status as well, how many individuals it actually is, what country they came from, any potential past criminal harm. All that stuff comes along with them. Plus, you have federal matching funds that come along with them. So Governor Lee's take on this was 2 or 3-fold. It was, we'll have information if they come to Tennessee. His fear was they could just go to Virginia, drive over the borderline on into Bristol. Now, suddenly they're in Tennessee. We have no matching federal funds and no information on. And then he coupled that 2 or 3-fold with the final fold of he thought it was the correct Christian thing to do. That was his appeal to Tennesseans was he thought there was a moral component behind this decision to look out for the least of these. So we need to bring them into the state because we can afford to do so right now, afford financially and afford ethically to do so. It's Governor Lee, yeah. Governor Lee that was making that decision. Now this committee meeting yesterday was essentially saying if you implicate state funds, you have to go through the legislature to do that. Going on to a different bill that we're actually seeing in here as well. And I'm not going to talk about this so much because it's super controversial. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of what's happening here. You'll see in the headlines there, a WCYB headline. I'm just reading the headline as I'm seeing it of what News Channel 5 is telling me. Anti-transgender bill advances as lawmakers return to work. Now, what this bill is meant to do is the same thing that's going on in Connecticut right now. And importantly, the same thing that was decided in Connecticut as of yesterday. This is meant to say for transgender athletes, and let's be completely honest, this is the slight one opinion that I'm going to give let me qualify. This is my opinion right now. This is not part of the article. The vast majority of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, let me say nearly 100% of the time, we're talking about individuals that were born male that are now identifying female and competing in sports with other females. That's the basic situation for the most part. Tennessee wants to pass some piece of legislation that essentially says you have to compete with the sex that you were born as. And this was a very controversial thing a while back because the judge in this case basically came down and decided on day one, you can't use biological or distinctive terms. You shouldn't be able to use man or woman. You shouldn't be able to use male or female when you're talking about this. This was in the court case. You should be forced to use transgender or transgender identifying female. The judge from day one was essentially saying, hey, it's discriminatory to this individual and it doesn't have anything to do with the case to not call them what they identify as. Now, in Connecticut, just yesterday, this same exact type of proposal was decided or ruled upon that it actually violates Title IX. If you want to get into the history of why that violates Title IX, we can. Being that I have about 15 minutes left until the bottom of the hour until we start opening up lines, I'm going to move on. I just want to make sure people are aware. That's what that story is about. If you want to follow along, dive into a little bit more. If you want to let me know how you feel about that in the Facebook notes section, by all means, let me know. Just wanted to make it aware. And the final point I'll add to this, man, is it's difficult for me as a male to come out and give commentary on this because this is not necessarily affecting males. I'm going to be completely honest there. This type of situation typically only tends to have an effect on the niche areas that females have carved out for themselves. I just don't think you're seeing a lot of scenarios where an individual is born female and therefore going to compete in male sports. I just don't think it happens. That being said, we have another story here about John DeBerry possibly getting back on the ballot. New legislation passed that might allow him to get back on the ballot. John DeBerry is a guy who was essentially kicked out of the Democrat Party in Tennessee because he identified with too many Republican ideals. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. Your opinion on that. He supported education choice. He was, dare I say, pro-life. He was fighting for his constituents is what it was. He's a representative from Memphis. He ran as a Democrat. He's always been a Democrat in his entire life. His constituents love him. I stress that word because I've seen it happen. They love him. Legislation indicating he might actually be able to run again. What ended up happening is they kicked him out of the party about a day before he was able to identify as Democrat, Republican, or Independent. So he might have missed the filing deadline. Follow up with that story if you want to see what happens there. And last local story here, before I get into some of the national headlines. The I Will Breathe rally against police brutality, white supremacy. Really? Is that headline just caught me. Did that change from when I posted this last night? The I Will Breathe rally against police brutality and white supremacy? I don't like that second part at all, man. I'm sorry. This is the way that I'm reading headlines. I'm literally doing this analysis live on it. The white supremacy part, for real, dude. Like, do we need that part? Do we need that aggravator? I don't know, man. It's the whole thing. We had solidarity in this issue. The entire country, all of us, every single one of us in this country had solidarity in the issue that this guy needed to face charges. He did something that it was murder. We all witnessed murder. Plain and simple is what would happen. And now, dude, like, it's just, they've divided. We're divided again. This massive peg came down out of nowhere. I was talking to my wife about this last night, dude. It was a 24-hour shift. Like, we felt one night, we all went to sleep thinking like, man, this officer may finally face charges. We're all in agreement about this. It's like this weird shifting, changing of times. There was a coalescence, solidarity. For the first time in a long time, I didn't even feel like my white friends were virtue signaling anymore. They were genuinely feeling compassion and angst and empathy and all of the stuff you need to do to make change. And then we went to sleep and woke up the next morning, and now all of a sudden we're divided again. Like, dude, what happened? Where did that happen? I know it's the same formula. It's the same pattern that always happens. It's just it was so fast this time. I don't know, man. I can't help but think there's some spiritual component to that. And I'm going way off the rails for a lot of Mr. Real News folks here. I get that, but it's just like whatever. Okay, so that's the headline. I will breathe rally against police brutality and white supremacy in Nashville here. This is a rally. It's going to be taking place this Saturday at Legislative Plaza. Go check that headline if you want to be able to participate. The rally is slated for Saturday, May 30th, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Now that's Central Standard Time. Participants are asked to meet at the parking lot. I don't even know why I'm preaching this, whatever. You can read the article for yourself. You can meet in that parking lot. Yeah, I would say just go read that. All right, move. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thanks, Shine. Shine talks in my head, by the way, y'all. He's doing his producer stuff on the side. Okay. Yes, this is one of the other things that the Trump tweet here going on to say that at my request, the FBI and Department of Justice are already well into investigation as to the very sad and tragic death in Minnesota of George Floyd. At my request, the FBI and Department of Justice are already well into an investigation as to the very sad and tragic death in Minnesota of George Floyd. You know, it's a little bit of proving the point I was making before. Goodness gracious, man. We had the support of the FBI, we had the support of the DOJ. Like, we're right on the cusp of doing something just monumental with this. And I don't know if it's going to make change or not at all. But Trump tweets about it. Trump has made massive legislative changes by tweeting. Trump has literally changed the face of the Republican Party by tweeting. Trump has changed the face of politics by tweeting. Trump won an election from his Twitter account, if we're being honest. How much more money did Hillary Clinton's camp spend than Trump did? Trump tweets, and that is the news. Literally, his Twitter account is the news, which is what makes this next story such an odd conundrum for people to work through, this Trump Twitter saga that's going on right now. Because it's this weird sort of like virus-like relationship. It's not even necessarily symbiotic, right? And the virus is not the best way to describe it. That's a terrible analogy. Scratch what I just said. Maybe it is symbiotic. They each need each other for existence. Trump needs Twitter to get the message out, and Twitter needs Trump to make Twitter more relevant. Right? And the media needs both of them to keep doing what they're doing so they can sell ads. Maybe this is all a part of the grand scheme, because if we're going down to what you see today here, the big news coming out from yesterday, Trump signed social media executive order calls for removal of liability protections over censoring. And Shine, by the way, before I get too deep into the story, if you see any Facebook comments that you want to get on, I'm switching between screens a lot here. So let me know if we need to catch up with them.
Well, here, I'll go ahead and just get us caught up a little bit. Kel, here, let me take down the Fox article from the screen so you can see Grant's pretty face. But Kel says the world has collectively lost its mind completely. Kel also says John DeBerry got railroaded. I'm glad there is an opportunity to get him back on the ballot. And I think that gets us caught up. And Judy says howdy from Grannyland. How cute. That's
what I'm talking about. Yeah. Albert said, media need that money, so clickbait happens. That's correct. Getting back to that Fox News headline, by the way. Trump signs an executive order that calls for removal of liability protections. And again, I feel like we don't need to hash this too much. So give me 30 seconds and I'll catch everyone up if it's a TLDR type moment type thing, or if you don't know what we're talking about. Section 230, the Communications Decency Act, is essentially what says social media companies, you guys are going to be called platforms. It's exactly what it sounds like. It will give you all give the populace a platform to express their opinion upon. And because you are platforms, meaning anybody and everybody to the tune of billions of individuals can come on your platform and say whatever they want to, you shouldn't be held liable for that stuff. It's not your opinion, it's their opinion. So we need to draw a hard legal line in the sand, if you will, as to what you are responsible for and what those people posting are responsible for, right? Makes sense. Oh, nice. Well, that's even better. Yeah, go ahead and play that Barr video. Let me know if you got that clipped up, man. We'll just let Barr explain it.
I'd like to ask the Attorney General, please, to say a couple of words, and he's very strongly behind it, backing it very powerfully. And again, we're going to be doing this. We're also going through Congress.
Well, as you mentioned, Mr. President, one of the things that I found has the broadest bipartisan support these days is the feeling that this provision, Section 230, has been stretched way beyond its original intention, and people feel that on both sides of the aisle. This was adopted 25 years ago to protect the fledgling industry, and its purpose was to allow websites that were serving as essentially bulletin boards for diverse third-party content coming on to say that you're not responsible for the content of that third-party information. And it also tried to encourage these companies to take down things like child pornography or human trafficking advertising and things by saying if you act to remove this kind of objectionable material, you won't be liable for taking it down. Now it's been completely stretched to allow what have become really behemoths who control a lot of the flow of information in our society to engage in censorship of that information and to act as editors and publishers of the material. So when they put on their own content, like fact-check content onto other people's content, and when they curate their collection, and when they start censoring particular content, including in many cases at the direction of foreign governments like Communist China, they become publishers, and they shouldn't be entitled to the same kind of shield that was set up earlier. Now, this executive order is a very strong step toward addressing this problem. It sets up a rulemaking procedure that will eventually be under the FCC to try to get back to the original interpretation and understanding of Section 230. It also empowers the Attorney General to work with state attorneys general to come up with model legislation that addresses this at the state level. And we're preparing federal legislation, which we will be sending over shortly for review at the Office of Management and Budget. So this is an important step to get back to the original understanding. You know, there's a bit of a bait and switch that's occurred.
You can go ahead and stop it there, man. I'll tell you, man, like him or hate him, man, Barr is so good at what he does, dude. Barr is so good. I mean, obviously there's a reason he is where he is, but he's so good at covering every single angle. He's so good at anticipating the retorts before they happen. Because as he was saying some of this stuff, I mean, obviously, you know where I stand in particular. My personal opinion on this, obviously, is I don't agree necessarily with this type of policy, especially if it's delivered unilaterally through the executive branch. I could possibly see the merits if legislation were to be passed to update Section 230, that would make it harder for social media companies to censor material. But in general, I just really don't like the idea of this policy. I don't like the idea of either party using the power of the state to influence the free market. Again, I've always said if Twitter wants to exclusively shut down conservatives, I say let them do it. A terrible product will fail inevitably in the free market, right? Honestly, it's going to be a weird analogy, but to some very small extent, please hear me, to a very small extent, I personally feel if a cake baker should have the freedom to discriminate against a homosexual couple, then I kind of feel like Twitter should have the freedom to discriminate against what they deem to be, speech that they don't want to put on their platform. With that being said, this is where Barr is so good, because every single one of those retorts I was thinking of, he had something to go for. Like, we're going to pan that off to the state attorneys, and they're going to work it out a legislation at a state level, and hopefully going to be able to kick this back to the legislature later on to update Section 230. For the time being, it's going to go directly through the FCC. It doesn't need any more explaining. You heard exactly what he just said. This is basically going to make it so that the FCC has regulatory ability. And I don't like that idea, man. I don't like the idea of an unelected portion of our government, the FCC, by way of regulations, being able to put something down on a private corporation. I can't say that I didn't see it coming. And the other thing here, importantly, and Sean, I'll let you respond to this too. This also makes it so that it would cut federal funding from social media platforms that censor users' political views. All right, so it'll cut federal funding. It'll also basically give a massive way to sort of attempt. You heard what their understanding here was. It will attempt to add some credibility or get back to the original interpretation of what Section 230 was supposed to be. Importantly, Sean, you did make this point yesterday, buddy. You did make the point that, like, this has been a couple decades since this thing was passed, and it was passed back in the day when you had, like, a single message board. Nobody could have anticipated how this would be applicable to 3.5 billion people using a similar platform. So maybe, it needs to be updated. I just don't like the way they're doing it, but go ahead, Sean.
Well, I don't know. I feel like it's like 3 years too late. I mean, and I don't think anything really changed. I don't think they legislated. What they did was advise. They gave an opinion, I guess, for judges to work off of, saying if people do this, then they are in violation of 230 and they are liable, basically. And that's the opinion of the Attorney General's office that's going out to everybody. But I can't say anything any better than Barr just did on... Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest point is the legislation that is guiding this is 25 years old and was written for a different time and a different place. I mean, if there was any other kind, let's say we didn't update our regulations on anything since the mid-90s. Just pick anything. Like we haven't learned stuff. Anyway, that's my thing. And I'll go back to, I just don't want to say anything more than I've said, and I don't want to be bombastic or hyperbolic. But I believe that our legislature can solve this issue where all parties will be able to feel like they can do business or exchange information and all that kind of stuff. I really believe that we can figure this out in America.
Well, the onslaught is just starting with Twitter because this is the most recent one. And I will say it's going to be weird, but to Twitter's credit, this started 48 hours ago, and within those 48 hours, they've actually made some slight attempt to be consistent in the way they apply these misleading flags. I say that because this whole thing, again, we remember started just 2 days after Twitter took the, quote, unprecedented, I'm reading from the Fox News article, 2 days after Twitter took the unprecedented step of slapping a misleading warning label on 2 of Trump's tweets concerning fraud risks of nationwide mail-in ballot. Now, again, remember yesterday, I brought up that tweet that Ice Cube sent out there that was comparing the officer that murdered, if you will, not even if you will, the officer that murdered George Floyd. And then right beside him was a picture of a guy that looked very similar, wearing a red either MAGA hat or some Trump-affiliated hat. And the implication that was to be drawn from that, obviously, he said a wolf in wolf's clothing is what the Ice Cube said. A wolf in wolf's clothing, and the demons are among us type thing. And fight the power, something like fight something, right? The implication that was to be drawn from that, obviously, was that it was a Trump supporter. Because he was a Trump supporter, he had racist tendencies, and therefore all Trump supporters have racist tendencies. That's what led to the actions at hand. Now, the problem with that, again, yesterday, was that it wasn't the same guy. It wasn't even the same dude in the picture. The guy was like a Canadian satirist or something. I think he makes fun of Trump supporters. I'm pretty sure that's what his role is. I'm pretty sure he plays the character of a guy that likes Trump supporters. Wasn't the same guy. Back to the story at hand. Twitter subsequently, Ice Cube hasn't removed that, Twitter subsequently labeled that tweet as well with a misleading flag. So they're trying to do something here, at least. Now, maybe it's a CYA move, I'm being completely honest. And Shine, bring up that next video there. It's under the Twitter Trump saga. It's labeled DOJ hires outside counsel as a sign is preparing case against Google. Okay, this onslaught is just starting with Twitter. You saw yesterday where Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, just like volunteered the information that he doesn't think Facebook or social media companies should be arbiters of truth. Well, I appreciate you for doing that, Facebook. Your platform says otherwise, but I appreciate that you're saying the right things, okay? Because I think what he's seeing is a little bit of you got the clip pulled up there, Sean? Go ahead and play that from the very beginning. I think this is a little bit of what Mark is like. No. Just start at the very beginning, and then we'll go to the 4 minutes one there. Yeah, start at the very beginning. This is a little bit of what Mark Zuckerberg is seeing. Go ahead.
Breaking news, Twitter stock has just doubled its losses. Facebook has more than doubled what it was down. And we do have Google just turning negative. You can see Alphabet sort of flat at the moment. Facebook's down 1.8%. It had been down 0.3% when we started. Twitter was down 2%. Now it's down 4.2%. We have Amazon down a fraction. At any moment, President Trump will shoot quite an arrow through an executive order that will crack down on social media names as both the Department of Justice and the state attorneys general near completion of their investigations. But will regulators take aim or hold their fire?
You can stop it right there, Sean.
Charlie Gasparino joins us now with
go ahead and Go ahead and fast forward that to about 4 minutes there. We'll pick it up right from there. Facebook, by the way, saying Albert, and Facebook saying, what free market? I post something and then I get my input yanked. If Albert is who I think it is, I know exactly you're right. That happens to you all the time. I totally understand that. Kelly's saying Facebook way too late. This should have been dealt with years ago. Totally agree. Now that is usually what ends up happening with tech as it relates to law. Law is always behind the curve of what's happening in society, especially when it comes to tech, which is one of the major problems with our law moving so slowly. Which is one of the major problems, I think, with society's reliance upon law. That's neither here nor there. Daniel said Facebook, they could solve the issue by stopping the ties between the government and the social media platforms. Stop sending them tax dollars. Yes. Right? Yes. 100%. Because Shine.
Yeah, something I didn't mention when you brought me in was what federal funding?
Yeah, right?
What federal funding? Something I say all the time when people say, oh, it's a private company, they can do whatever they want. Well, then tell them to stop taking federal money for this private company. Tell Amazon to drop its CIA contracts and then tell me about a private company.
Right?
How private is it if you're giving it government money? Isn't it like a non-government entity at that point, especially with their control of market share?
Right. And then it lends this idea to like, okay, man, hang on. It would be one thing if it's a private company, but if you're taking federal funding, then the argument seems to be much stronger that it would be a public forum. It seems to be much stronger that we should have some type of access or right to it because in part, it's our taxpayer dollars that are going into some of this funding. What federal funding, right? Albert goes on to Facebook and say it was written in a time where the internet was more adult themed. I totally understand that. More adult themed in the sense of every word, every sense of that word, right? It was more adult themed of like, sort of people hiding behind these keyboards of sort of living vicariously through pseudonyms on Facebook that they feel totally emboldened to say whatever they're going to say because they know they're never going to be held accountable for it in real life. That's exactly right. Right. That's another part of this what's added this problem. Remember the AI that Microsoft created? They created this AI to go out there and see if it could pass the Turing test of be an AI, but act like a real human being and fool actual human beings that it's a human being as opposed to an AI. Well, within 24 hours, it was going on Twitter and responding to comments. It was going on YouTube and responding to comments. Within 24 hours, they had to take it down because that AI had become the most racist thing on the internet. It was just throwing out like terribly inflammatory comments. And it was just responding to the input that it was receiving. That's a great point. It's a great point, Albert. Stacy says on Facebook, finally, does anyone have a link to the actual order Trump signed? I can't find a proposal from last year. I can find a proposal from last year, but not a copy of the actual order. Yes. By the way, in the Fox News article that's linked there that Shine showed a second ago, you can find that at the top of the descriptions of the show notes there, Stacy. Click on that. It's the first paragraph down. You'll see a hyperlink there. It says, flanked by Attorney General Barr, President Trump signed, quote, an executive order. If you click on that word executive order, it will link directly to the actual language of that executive order. It was just too long to go through on this program. But yeah, you can find it right there in that Fox News article. Shine, by the way, in 4 minutes of this video here brings up a very important point that I still can't get over. Go ahead and play that question real quick.
This is the case that's out there. And, but Barr is going to have to explain conservative legal theory. And he's a conservative in the tradition of Judge Bork is always held that antitrust. If you violate antitrust laws as a monopoly, you got to show harm to consumers. Exactly how is Google as a free service harming consumer?
Right. That's
and
always been the question.
It's going to be a difficult thing. But again, the outside counsel is a big thing. It means they're bringing the case. I've reported that now. It's out there. It's moving the stock. When I speak to the outside counsel, get their comment.
You go ahead and pause right there, Sean.
Okay.
That's the question that I still can't try and figure it out either. All right. He says, in order to prove antitrust, monopoly, in order to prove that there's a monopoly going on, in order to show antitrust, or I suppose one of the elements here is that Google has to be harming their customer base somehow. It's a sort of a side component of like, what does Google actually have a monopoly over? Access to information. It's not something. It's an intangible. That's one of the problems here, right? It's like, okay, you can have a monopoly over steel or telecommunications or something, but you can put your hand on that. You can see it. You can feel it. You can map it. You can chart it. I suppose you can in some sense with Google, but how can you show that they're harming their customer base? It would be a very subjective thing to have to go in there and show, well, what Google's doing is they're prioritizing, one search bar over another or one company over another because they're paying more. But is that harming a customer base? Go ahead, though, Sean.
I'll take a stab at it. At least what I've heard, I don't know, from other people is, for instance, in Section 230, when they are curating, they have to do so in good faith. Correct? I think that's in the Section 230. For people that are more like vendors than users for YouTube, like part of the partnership program, things like that, receiving basically vendors of content for YouTube. If they're making money and they started their business when terms of service were X, and then they stopped making money because of a bad faith terms of service change or a misapplied only applies to certain people terms of service change, because I really think that's where they're going to get in trouble, is they applied some of their rules to some people and not others. And if some of those people lost their business, that's harm, correct? Because they're not really like users. They're like vendors. Think of it that way.
Okay.
Because they have like an agreement with YouTube in order to do business. Money is exchanged. And if they are operating at I'm repeating myself, but this is the point. If they start the business and there's certain rules, and okay, if you follow these rules, we can do business together. If they arbitrarily change those rules and then also misapply or only apply to certain people based on a certain kind of ideology, I think you can prove harm. Just like you could with any other business with vendors and say, here's our contract. You get what I'm saying? And the only reason they can violate said contract with almost no repercussions is because of their position in the market. If they weren't a monopoly, they wouldn't violate the contract because they'd lose the business.
And I will say this much, regardless of how you feel about this in the U.S., let it be known that Google has already paid out to the tunes of tens of billions of euros. Pretty sure that's right. Yes, tens of billions of, if not hundreds of millions of euros for doing this exact same type of violation in Europe. Now, I don't know how the EU holds them to a standard or whatever. I'm fairly certain that their laws are far more stringent than America's. But to Shine's point, okay, that's what's going on here. Is they've already been doing this and being held accountable for in other countries, and I think Trump realizes that. I think he realizes that he has a bit of that backing. Now, again, I'm still on the side of like Google's a slightly different animal to me than say a Facebook or a Twitter, because Google's train left the station a very long time ago. Nobody's catching up with that algorithm, right? Like they have an actual control of whatever that market is. They have an actual control over. I'm not exactly sure there's been a full demonstration of the monopoly harming individuals. But Sean, to end this story out here, man, and then we'll go on to the real topic at hand so I can see if people actually want to call on that number you've seen scroll across the bottom. We're about to get into finishing the show here, the George Floyd Minneapolis riot / protest / demonstration / whatever you want to call them is what we're going to finish the show with today. Play that last little clip there. It's a YouTube clip. Says Trump says he deleted his Twitter account in a heartbeat. That YouTube link, oh, it's not blue. Whatever, you can still click on it. Click that YouTube link, play that entire video for him, because the answer here is just a very, very funny. Yeah, play it from the very beginning. It's a pretty funny answer and a true one, and proves the point here in the back end that like they kind of need each other. And some people's analysis so far is like this move by Trump is going to shoot him in the foot, right? Like it's gonna blow back on him. But go ahead and play that clip if you got it ready. Oh, sorry. It's the one. It's see right beside where it says Trump says he deleted Twitter account in a heartbeat, and it says YouTube, and it's that same black font. That's what I'm saying. It's not blue. It doesn't look like a hyperlink, but it should still work. Yeah. No, that's my fault. Yeah.
Given your concern with Twitter, have you given any consideration to deleting your account, to just walking away from this platform you've been so critical of?
Well, if you weren't fake, I would not even think about it. I would do that in a heartbeat.
I'm real,
but the news is fake. if you look at what gets printed in newspapers, if only the public could understand where, they're reading a story and they think it's real, and it's not real in so many cases. And I'm not saying in every case. You have some great journalists. You have some journalists that I have great respect for. But largely, I find, at least in a political sense, there's so much fake news, it's disgraceful. I would do that in a heartbeat if we had a fair press in this country. I would do that in a heartbeat. There's nothing I'd rather do than get rid of my whole Twitter account, but I'm able to get to, I guess, 186 million people when you add up all the different accounts and add Facebook and Instagram. It's a lot of people, and that's more than the media companies have, frankly, by a lot. And so if I get a story that's wrong, I can put a social media. I don't usually use the word Twitter. I say social media. But I put something out, and the next day or the next hour or the next minute, everybody's reading about it. So I'm able to refute fake news, and that's very important.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, dude, right. I mean, goodness gracious, that whole minute and a half was just so chock filled.
Hey, you don't like my Twitter account? It's your fault.
Right? I mean, it's an argument that's hard
what he was saying to all those people. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't. You hate my Twitter account? Then do it right, and I promise I'll get rid of it, which he won't.
No,
it's
he
just
won't.
like a huge troll.
He certainly won't get rid of it, right? It is. It's a massive troll. And it's also a little bit of fire across the bow of social media companies saying, like, yo, you better act right. Okay, we're going into election. We know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. Everybody knows what you're doing. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the fact that you're rolling this out so quickly, so closely to November, we all get the play. That's that surface level analysis right there. Like, we get that. This is Trump basically saying, like, bro, if you want to meet your dividends, if you got some stockholders to pay back to, you want to show up to that board meeting later on and present to them why your stock just dropped 10, 15% in a single 24-hour period. We can keep playing that game. I have no problem. Right? But you better act right. It's a negotiation is what it is. Okay? Now I don't feel great about it. I understand what's happening, and I certainly don't hope that this sticks around. As I said before, one of my real fears with this is that is Trump doing it today, okay, but if that sets a precedent for President Buttigieg to do it in 2024, now I got a major problem with it, okay? And you can't shift off like that. You have to have some consistency. But when he says, like, dude, if you media would get it right, I wouldn't have to do this for you. Totally true. You can't argue with that. But then he goes on to make this weird sort of comparison of, I can reach 185, 86 million people in a moment and not have to go through y'all's little filter, which is in a very strange way treating Twitter like a publisher, or maybe that's the pure definition of a platform and always has been, right? Like, that's where this whole conversation starts from. Anyways, just something interesting to end on there. I think what people are saying, though, is that this is clearly Trump just doing some negotiating, because if he's actually going to follow through with this will be a backfire like he just proved what the backfire would be. He just told you that he can reach 186 million people instantaneously. He don't want to lose that power. He don't want to lose that ability. He's not being completely serious about this being shut down. He's certainly not being serious about stopping his Twitter account. And part of this is because of what you're seeing right here, this National Review article. Last thing I'll hit, and then I'll get into the other stories here. We may go a little bit long today. I don't know. I mean, because there's some other stuff we want to cover here. By the way, anything we're talking about today, if you want to call in, give me your opinion, 615-807-0619. That's 615-807-0619. Give me a call. It's past the bottom of the hour here. We'll let you know, have you on, talk about whatever you want to, Open Line Fridays. But the idea for this National Review article quickly, and I think this is a little bit of what Trump's been mentioning before, is that the CDC just sort of quietly came out with a new update to some of these numbers over the last couple of days, and it indicates that the fatality rate of COVID-19 is substantially lower than either they originally reported on or was once thought. And this National Review article doesn't even prove a point. He just published this information. Whoever this guy is, who is this? Robert Verbruggen. Robert Verbruggen. He just published this article just to draw attention to the idea that, hey, this is a thing. It's just out there. And nobody's really talking about it. I mean, a few people are reporting on it, but it's not really garnered the information like I thought. Hey, and I got a call coming through already. Goodness gracious. Let's see who this is. Get out of here. Hey, hang on. Hey, caller, you're on live with the Real News. What's your name? What's your issue? Oh, well, they hang up. All right, man, this is live stuff, man. We're trying to do this. You know what I'm saying? Got a caller here. Call me back from the 212 area code again if you want to get back on. Maybe it was a mistake on my end. Anyways, Give me a call back. Like I said, what's that number here? Hang on. It's 615-807-0619. So CDC comes up with this new updated information. This guy says, last week I was searching for the internet for some COVID-19 statistics and and I came across a new CDC website. The site features some numbers the federal government is using to model the spread of the epidemic. One in particular caught my eye, the 0.4%, the current, quote, best estimate of the disease. The current, quote, best estimate of the disease fatality. I'm getting all kind of bings and bangs here for this call-in number. So the new best estimate is 0.4. The document also said that the 35% of infections are asymptomatic, which suggests that the infection fatality rate is just 0.26%. These numbers struck this individual, the author, as low for several reasons. For one thing, the virus has already killed 0.2% of all New Yorkers, and obviously a much higher percentage of those who've actually been infected in the city. For another, if we've had 100,000 deaths nationwide and a CFR of 0.4%, that means that we've had 25 million symptomatic cases. You understand? Let me break it down one more time. If we've had 100,000 deaths nationwide and a CFR of 0.4%, doing that math would show that we've had 25 million symptomatic cases nationwide, including cases without symptoms. More than 10% of the entire country has been infected, which seems out of sync with what we're hearing from serology tests. Individual studies and reviews of the evidence tend to put the infection fatality rate somewhere between 0.5% and 1%, but CDC is coming out saying now, what does that look like? 0.4% of what they were saying before? 0.4% is the current best estimate of the disease case fatality rate. He goes on to say that though there's at least one dissenting review that puts it lower, while managing to not include any studies finding a fatality rate above 0.5%, which there are plenty. He said, I put out a tweet expressing my confusion, and things spiraled quickly, as they often do on social media. A follower alerted a prominent biologist who wrote a thread criticizing the CDC's new numbers. I don't know how you, for whatever, you by all means criticize the CDC's new number, but the next morning he was featured, this Twitter line was featured on a CNN story about the issue. There's also been many media reports since with the narrative predictably varying from anything from, quote, heroic scientific experts hammer corrupt CDC for fake low fatality rate. And that was apparently a headline, that heroic scientists are now coming up hammering the corrupt CDC. I don't know when the CDC became corrupt as well, but I guess the CNN, the CDC is also corrupt now when the WHO is fine to be trusted. But they're hammering for fake low fatality rates. That was on the one hand. All the way to the other hand, the CDC finally admits that COVID is basically harmless. Now, I went into this story to prove the point of what Trump is saying. Like, this is media. This is modern media. So what is he supposed to do with this, right? Like, if this wasn't the modern media, if you can get a single CDC report and have headlines that read everything from heroic scientist experts hammer corrupt CDC for fake low fatality rate, all the way to CDC finally admits COVID is basically harmless. If you can get those two headlines out of the exact same data, then Trump has a point, does he not? All right, let me see if this call works, by the way. Michael Stimpy Stimson. Michael Stimpy Stimson. Hey, Michael, can you hear me, buddy? You're live on Real News. Hey, give me a second here. Let me share the audio. Thanks for reminding me there, Sean. Give me 2 seconds, Michael. This is live. Michael Stimpy Stimson, buddy. Hey, how you doing, man? Can you hear us?
Yes, excellent show, and you guys are starting to connect a lot of the dots. You're doing fantastic. Now, this is after you left. Elaine Davis actually had me up to the studio, and I did a special segment. And do you like James Corbett, or are you familiar with the Corbett Report?
Yeah, familiar at least. Yeah, I don't follow him as much as other folks, but yeah, definitely.
Well, there are several pieces that are an absolute must-watch, because the first piece is how big oil conquered the world. Now, because over the years that I've been talking with you, and I say how everything is connected to everything, for me to actually take the time and try to explain that, we don't have enough time for that. But there was a more recent series, it's a 4-part series that's strictly about Bill Gates. Now, whenever you start looking at history, because now you're looking at the CDC, you're looking at the manipulation of money and why Facebook, all these other platforms are getting so much money and all of these other pieces, because these are all pieces of that individual puzzle that paint that bigger picture, because now we're starting to see the CDC, our medical community, and all of this in the force of our medicine being utilized as a propping tool to actually guide and be the guise of the people, and not just Tennessee, not just the United States, but the entire planet. Now, when you look at this, because now you're starting to ask the bigger questions, because we've got, you know, in reality, depending on especially what states you're looking at, this number is less, far less than 0.4% when it comes down to this COVID virus. But when you actually start going back through media, and this starts as early as the 90s, they're talking about the essence and how important it is to get ready for the next generation in technology. And so that means that everything, when it comes down to our business, has to be done with electronic transactions. It's gotten to be all of the information that is going to be shared, we actually have to put more focus into our digital system and how people can access that information. And this started back in the 90s. So now when you're starting to look at these public platforms, like, for example, if you look at a lot of your businesses now, when it comes down to trying to take care of your bills, when it comes down to your daily lifestyle, shoot, you can even go online and actually do all of your grocery shopping from the computer. This is part of that design, because now it removes you from the store, and it's just we're the cattle. They don't want us to be dirtying up and mucking up the place. Basically.
Yeah, there's a story about an Amazon store. Not even a story. There is an Amazon store. It's like a Whole Foods style Amazon store in the San Francisco area, I believe. Don't quote me on this, but you don't pay anybody. There's no employees that work there. You don't actually take out a wallet and swipe a card. You just walk into the store, and everything has a QR code that's on the actual package. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of cameras that are all over the ceiling of this store. I mean, you can find this on YouTube. A lot of people report on it. It's fascinating. There's thousands of cameras that are all over the store. You just take this package, put it in your basket, and just walk out of the store with it. And it charges your Amazon account after the fact. Whatever you pass that threshold with, based upon the QR codes that are in your basket, it charges you with, and you just walk out. And I don't know if that's a little bit to your point or not, and I'm not trying to go off on too much of a tangent, but it lends some credence to what you're saying about everything sort of going in a digital style, right?
Yes, exactly. And you're exactly right. And because when it comes down to this, because this is something that's been getting a lot of attention and a lot of focus that they've been working on for quite some time now. And when it comes down to all of this, because these are all things that are actually being utilized as tools, because we can already start to see with our own eyes that they're eliminating jobs. Artificial intelligence, when it comes down to this store, because this piece is actually several years old now, if memory serves me correctly. And now when I'm trying to make sure I don't lose my track of thought here, because
well, let me ask,
when you're looking at,
as you're talking here, I just want to make sure we're keeping, to the format of the show here too. The next story that I might end with here, and Sean, we'll go to about 10:30, I guess, if you want to, if that's cool with you. I'm not sure what your day is looking like here, so we'll get a couple more minutes with Stimpy here and then switch too. But what you just said, man, they're starting to use these as tools. Okay, now when you said that, what pinged off for me was like, okay, we have the situation going on with the riots in Minneapolis. Okay, overnight it seemed like we just shifted from, as I started the show with, it seems like we shifted from this moment of solidarity. Everybody was on the same page. It was kind of a beautiful thing to witness, buddy. It was this thing of where like we're finally here. We finally got it. Like Colin Kaepernick's kneeling was something that was bringing back up again, and you actually had people on the same side about that issue again. Like, yes, we need to do something about this. It was right on the back end of that African American guy in Georgia, I believe, where these two dudes sort of drove him down in the middle of the street. It was right after the fact of this Karen individual, having the cops or calling the cops on an African American. Like all these racially charged stories were circulating. It was like people were fed up. We were done with it. We need to do something. And then like overnight, man, it just like it it's shifted. I don't know what happened. Now all of a sudden we start hating each other again, right? I mean, I'm looking at the Facebook stories that we got out a second ago, the censorship that's going on Twitter, and I don't know, man. If you can direct us back to the overall point here, land the plane a little bit for me, man. Are you saying that some of this is actually playing into not necessarily the protest, but at least how agitated, how angst-driven we're all feeling right now? Is there a subconscious awakening going on?
Well, when it comes down to the bigger picture, because what you're asking yourself is the same question that everyone else has actually been finding themselves asking themselves. Does the world feel right to you? Does everything feel okay? No. And now, when it comes down to what exactly is wrong, that's going to be for you to answer that question, because your reality is subjective to only you. So I've tried talking to people and tried to explain this to people, and a lot of people do not want to listen to this. They don't want to think about it when you're telling them about what the N95 mask is, for example, and how it was designed and what the health impacts are on the human body. When it comes down to more manipulation of the information that's actually been out there, because this is getting increasingly harder to find. But back in March, I found at least over a half dozen of different articles that were talking about a special shipment from Xinjiang, China to Wuhan, China. This shipment was for sodium ascorbate, 50 metric tons of sodium ascorbate. And that was back in February. And in March, they released the lockdown out of Wuhan, China. They were administering up to 230,000 milligrams of sodium ascorbate. And what do you know? In less than a month, the lockdown in Wuhan, China is released. And now you can try to find those articles. And this is the manipulation of information, because you have to always remember the medical industry here in the United States, it is their job to protect you. And what also happened back in the 90s, it was the next gen pharmaceuticals. These are the $1,000 pills. It was all profit, and there was absolutely nothing that they had to worry about, because you already know about a lot of these bills that were signed back in the 80s under Reagan that basically gave complete amnesty to the pharmaceutical industry to where they're no longer held accountable. And when you start thinking about all of this, because we already know about ID 2020 at this point in time, HR 6666, the list goes on. But what actually happened back in, I believe it was about 2017, 2018, Trump signed under an executive order. I just want to remind this to you, because this executive order protects our amnesty when it comes down to actually being vaccinated. It puts the power back into our choice. From what I'm understanding,
well, I'll tell you, man,
has not been changed.
The vaccination stuff is something that's like that conversation hasn't even started, man. Hasn't even started. And I'll tell you, man, Stimpy, we got to hit the end of the show here, buddy, or at least move on to the next topic so Sean and I can get the whole work thing going. But buddy, I really appreciate you calling in, man. And we'll talk to you soon, probably next Friday even, buddy. You have a good one, all right?
Sounds excellent. Thanks a lot, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, buddy. Hey, there goes Michael Stimpy Stimson, great friend of the show there, man. 615-807-0619 if you want to voice your opinion at 615-807-0619. Stimpy is the kind of guy that's just so chock full of information, man. I tell him all the time, like, Stimpy, buddy, I don't know why you don't have a show of your own. I'm not sure why you haven't started this YouTube thing or Facebook thing. You can let him go, and he will, like, literally just 2-3 hours of some of the most in-depth, intense information that I've ever heard in my entire life. And it's there, it's solid, it's fluid, it's lucid, man. It's constant, just like stream of consciousness stuff, man. Go. Yeah, and I'm telling you, man, Stimpy bringing up some good points, though, man, about people sort of waking up, this sort of subconscious awareness of things just don't feel right. It's an intangible. You can't really describe it too well, but there's something going on. And this story in particular about what's coming out of Minneapolis, man, there's just something going on here that I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to be careful about the way we do this. And there's this Reason article entitled "Minneapolis Police Killed George Floyd, Then Failed to Protect Owners from Riots." If you have an opinion on this particular topic, give me a call here, by the way, 861-587-0619. We'll go for about another 15, maybe 30 minutes here, see if people want to talk about this topic. We have a lot of videos to play through, a lot of topics to get through here. But we all know what's going on with the story, okay? It seems like everybody was on the same page. Every single person in this country was on the same page. Solidarity to the max, man. We all thought, okay, officer, Looks like a murder. Bring a charge. People don't want to wait. I get it. Everybody's there, man. Like, the tempers are hot. It's right in the back end of a couple other racial issues. Reason has an article here saying that Minneapolis police killed George Floyd and then failed to protect property owners from riots. I don't know, though. Shine, honestly, buddy, like, it's a difficult premise for me to get my head around. Right? It's a very difficult premise because the title of the article almost, and I want to qualify, almost is inherently self-refuting. It's a bit circular. It's maybe not the best way to describe it, but it's certainly inherently self-refuting. So Minneapolis police killed George Floyd. Problem with the authority. Problem with the power of the state. Problem with police officers. Comma, then failed to protect property owners from riots. However, we need the power of the state. We need the power of authority. We need police. I think what they're trying to get at is in between that comma there somewhere, there's a proper middle road of the actual way that the police officers should operate. There's a proper middle road of what the power of the state should actually look like. I think that's what they were going for. It's just, it was difficult for me to parse the purpose of what was going on here.
You had me at Minnesota police failed, you know.
That should have been it. Just like Minnesota police failed.
That could have been the article right there.
Police in Minneapolis catalyzed Wednesday night's violent protest by killing George Floyd on Monday. They've since done a terrible job of protecting innocent property owners from being victimized by rioting that's erupted in response to Floyd's death. Floyd was killed Monday night after being stopped. Yes, we know all this. We know all this. Yes. Video, the incident. Yes, whatever. We proved the point with this article, I think. Shine, do me a favor, though. Pull up, if you will. Just get this ready for the people. At the very bottom of those list of show notes, the section says George Floyd, Minneapolis. At the very bottom, the last one that's in yellow highlight, it says, here's a armed civilian standing outside business helping to stop looters. In my opinion, this is how you stop the nonsense of looters and stuff. There's a headline here. I'll read it to you right now. It's at the very bottom of that little section there of the George Floyd, Minneapolis riots.
Yeah, but it's the last Twitter, one, right?
Yeah, it's that Twitter video. Okay, yeah.
It's on screen.
Pull that up and get that ready. And let me read this headline real quick as to why I'm going into that. Okay, so the Reason article just said maybe there's probably a proper role for the authority of the state to play here. They failed us 2 times. They used it way too much when they killed a man, and they didn't use it enough to protect property rights. If police are around for anything, it's to protect property rights, right? I get that. It's also a bit of like, I don't know, man, like where are you drawing that line, Reason? How do you want it to operate? I go directly into a headline real quick as we're about to hit this video here. The headline's not worth bringing up necessarily, but the headline indicates Minneapolis protest over George Floyd's death turn chaotic. We'll show you some of those chaotic videos in just a second. The National Guard is actually called in. This is a Forbes headline. Trump actually tweeted about this saying, hey, man, y'all have a problem. We're going to send you troops. Between 50 and 60 state troopers had already been dispatched to this Minneapolis police precinct that was burned last night. We got video of this. We have video of this in just a second. Thousands marched in the street on Tuesday night. Protesters assembled outside police headquarters, burned a lot of businesses to the ground. It's a major problem. The response has basically been martial law time, man. Got to shut this down. Time for martial law. I would propose, if I could be so bold, you don't necessarily need the power of the police, and you don't necessarily need the power of the National Guard troops coming in if you do what these folks are doing right here in this Twitter clip. Shine, go ahead and play that video for them real quick if we got that ready.
So, tell me who you are.
Well, I mean, free Americans, yeah.
And what are you doing today?
We were out here yesterday, too, down on the original protest site. So basically, you've seen the records that cops keep. And cops are...
Is that the wrong thing?
No, I just can't hear it on my end. Sorry. It's no bad. I was
a lot less likely to try and tread on people's rights when there's other armed Americans with them. So we figured it's about damn time that or at least I figure that it's about damn time some heavily armed rednecks stood with fellow citizens.
And why are you protecting this store?
Well, I mean, this wasn't exactly a specified action. We've been kind of, so we just kind of ended up here. We've been moving around and just trying to see what's what without getting necessarily completely slapped by massive groups of people. And while we were walking, somebody mentioned that there were some guys at the back of us actually wanted to know if they were over to go buy something, and they said that they're closed and they're defending their businesses. Oh yeah, Target's on fire. Yep. By the way. Yeah. But and anyway, so we heard that. We're like, well, we better kid up and go see if these guys need help. And turns out these guys are out here with machetes and shattered windows trying to keep looters out of the business because cops can't get in here. And so, I figured before they were cops, they were just Americans. So here we are.
Or, during the LA riots.
Or during the LA riots. Collateral damage, I guess.
Everyone protected their own stuff. That's where, you got the term rooftop Korea.
Yeah, right.
Bottom line, justice for Floyd.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, man.
I hope they stop looting at some point.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm off on this, but I think that this is a pretty decent way to protect your stuff. A full-on representation of the Second Amendment, if I've ever seen one. You've seen these memes been going around recently. I've been like, why didn't police brutality happen at the protests that were going down at the city halls and the state capitol buildings, over the shutdowns? I don't know, man. The memes seem to indicate, this is a meme's opinion, not my opinion necessarily, but the memes seem to indicate that one of the reasons why there wasn't police brutality is because people were strapped. Okay? I'm not advocating that necessarily, but at least in this situation, look at the power that's happening right now. People stepping up and doing the right thing, protecting their property, protecting their livelihood.
Well, protecting other people's property.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
yes,
quote of the day is, before there were police, there were Americans. That was awesome.
Yeah, man.
And it's not to disparage police. It's just like, it's that don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country kind of thing. Feels good anyway.
And I look, man, there was just multiple reports last night of thing after thing after thing of people showing footage of police just not showing up, showing footage of buildings burning, showing footage of buildings getting broken into, and police couldn't show up. They couldn't show up. They're not going to risk that. So what happens in the meantime? And this is not just the only video of individuals standing out in front of their own businesses with, armed. There were several other videos. There's one other video in particular of African-American store owners standing out front. It's just a particular word was dropped. You all know the particular word I'm talking about. It was another African-American talking to another African-American, and a particular word was dropped. We can't use that on YouTube because it would shut down immediately. But this is not certainly a Second Amendment supporter, and I believe this is a circumstance where it works. Sean, if you could real quick, at the top of that George Floyd section, just so we can show the audience a little bit of what happened last night. See where it says this is the video that's getting the most attention, a 5 to 6 hour long live stream. There's that red lettering underneath that says coverage from the local affiliate helicopter footage. That YouTube clip right beside that. Open that up if you could. Play that from the very beginning and just show them a little bit of what was going on last night.
On WCCO and CBSN Minnesota.
Protesters have set fire to Minneapolis' 3rd police precinct.
We want to give you a look from Sky 4. The significant thing about what's going on here symbolically is the 3rd precinct is where the officers who were involved in the George Floyd arrest were headquartered. And for them to take over this is significant for the protesters. The other thing that's we find a little unusual about this is there was such a heavy police presence at the 3rd precinct for the last 3 days, with officers barricading the front of the building, officers on the roof, the use of tear gas, rubber bullets, things to keep people away. Obviously, protesters have figured out a way to get through those barricades. You can see people occasionally throwing debris on the fire to keep it going, but the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis at Lake and Minnehaha, just a few blocks from 28th Street, appears to be the front of it on fire right now.
Yeah, we're looking from Sky 4. Well, they just turned the camera there, but to me it looked like it was at the front of the building. I don't know if it's inside the building.
You can go ahead and pause that one,
Sean. The 3rd precinct there.
Hey, as I'm talking here, Shine, too, that next video down, it says the longer format lasers they were shining. There's all kind of links to the show notes, by the way, of just cataloging all the stuff that happened last night, cataloging all the video that you went through last night. And as you're seeing some of this destruction, the aftermath coming on the video behind here, I want to harken back to with this next little rant right to the man, but I don't really know if it is necessarily. And I'm not trying to speak for Stimpy here. That's what it was, man. I just don't know. And first of all, I don't know if this was an organic thing. And secondly, I don't know if this level of destruction is something that is either going to help prove the point or it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel in such a quick period of time. We went from everybody wanting to do. Martyrs also not all right there. Represent. Now all we're talking about is this. I don't believe it because, man, I'm telling you, like, there's another story linked in the show notes here. I don't know how true it is. But there's another story linked to the show notes here. You'll see it's from Pro Sports Extra. indicating that there might have been a plant from the police officers. There might have been somebody in there that was just causing a riot, causing ruckus just to start something to pop off. And when that happens, this groupthink mentality takes over. Don't focus so much on the fact that I'm linking that article. I'm just linking the article and the subsequent YouTube video to prove the point that typically in these situations of protests and riots and demonstrations or whatever, so when stuff gets set on fire, what ends up happening is a couple select few individuals do this, and that groupthink mentality takes over and people go wild. This article in particular ends up showing a person that's completely clad in black, wearing that gas mask or something, and you can watch the YouTube video. He walks around to AutoZone when stuff is just super calm, nothing's going on, and he's just whacking. Pick up milk, yep. Pick up eggs, yep. Now go by AutoZone and smash windows, yep. Here we go. It's just another thing to do that day. It was weird. People are trying to stop him. They're actively trying to stop this guy from smashing windows. One guy follows him further down the street. Say, hey, man, what are you doing? And somebody indicates, now I don't know if this part is true or not, but somebody indicates that guy with this big black umbrella behind him, that guy walks into a police precinct later on. The idea is that somebody went out there to cause all this stuff to pop off. Now, that is not necessarily my opinion. I'm just telling you that is a single thread that's come out of some of these stories. And I will say, we have definitive proof that when this stuff has happened in the past, there are select individuals that are trying to exploit a vulnerable situation to their advantage. To take advantage of a vulnerable situation, to break into stores, to loot, to do all these things. And when that happens, it causes everybody else to go along with them. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think this is what's happening in this situation, at least a little bit of it, because it just doesn't feel real. It just doesn't feel organic. It feels like something or someone wanted to take hold of. If I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, okay, man, what's the best? This whole divide and conquer strategy, that's worked for us in the past. What's happening right now? Every single person in this country is on the same page about criminal justice reform. Every single person in this country is on the same page about, maybe the state has a little bit too much power. Maybe this whole thing of, blanket immunity for police officers. I'm not saying we, totally revisit that topic of conversation, but maybe we should at least have conversations about it. Maybe this idea of, I don't know, select individuals being able to, be judge, jury, and executioner all at the same time. Maybe that's not the best way to do it. If I was a person that was saying, hey, that's where we're at, how do I stop that conversation from happening? Well, you cause stuff to pop off again, right? You enrage people to the extent that you're raging to the extent that now something like this happens. And now the only thing we're talking about is these riots and this destruction that happened last night. And my only point of saying this is I just don't believe it. Obviously, I believe that it happened. I'm looking at it. You're looking at it on the screen. Yes, it clearly happened. The thing happened. There is no way to justify that happening. There is no way to rationalize it. There's no way to look at what happened there and defend those actions. But in those actions, all we're talking about right now are those actions. Nobody's talking about the fact that just 24 hours ago, we were on the precipice of major, monumental, shifting change. I'm talking paradigm shift, moving over tin windows, man. We were going to have that conversation. And I think a few people came in here and just ruined it for everybody. I think it was just a select few people that ruined this thing for everybody. Now, it may sound like I'm defending these protests. It might. I don't care what you think about that. I don't. Because I just don't believe that this is what this community wanted. I just don't believe that this is how this community wanted to be portrayed. And honestly, the frustrating thing now is we live in a day and age where you have to pick a team. And in spite of logic, you have to defend that team to the death. And I think there's a lot of people out there right now on both sides, that are defending things that they know to be illogical because the times call for it. The times call for us to defend the illogic because we don't want to give up on our team. You cannot surrender, even an inch. So you see this angst, this pressure cooker situation coming out of a COVID-19 shutdown, and it leads into this. And marginalized minorities communities for decades and decades have just not been heard on this issue. And finally they were starting to be heard, and now it's just squandered, man. It's not just sad to see. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And I would implore our audience to go find some people that you know personally that's preaching that other message, that's preaching that message of solidarity, of unity, of coming together with your fellow man to make a change on some of this stuff. Get back to the message at hand that Christ himself would want to present to all of us, that there is nothing that excludes you from this community except denial of the proposition itself, that you can be included, that we will fight for you, that we bleed the same blood, man. That's the message. We almost had it. Get back to that. My name is Mr. Henry. Signing off for today. David Sean Thompson, best buddy in the world over there. Hey, man, we'll see you back on Monday doing it big. Peace.